In the middle of the forest, far from the city and from any familiar noise, tranquility can turn into tension in seconds. What was supposed to be just another hike or a quiet camping trip ended up turning into something strange and hard to believe. And what's most unsettling is that everything was recorded by cameras, with footage that, to this day, no one has been able to explain. A content creator had a simple proposal: spend the night in the forest, record the experience, and share with the audience that raw feeling of isolation that only the wilderness environment provides. But from the beginning there was something different in the air. The woods seemed denser, the silence heavier, and the fog began to form even before the sun disappeared completely. While setting up the improvised shelter, the YouTuber decided to tell an old regional legend, the story of Lady Sybil, a woman who, according to local folklore, is said to have made a dark pact to acquire supernatural abilities. They say she became a figure capable of taking on different forms, wandering through the forest after a sequence of tragedies that culminated in her capture by an influential nobleman. Since then, residents have associated strange sounds and apparitions in the region with her presence.
As I'm about to go out on a camp, and
as the night went on, the narrative began to blend with reality. The fog grew thicker, drastically limiting visibility. Branches cracked in the distance. At a certain moment, the sound of a woman's screams and gunshots echoed through the woods, something that completely broke any atmosphere of mysticism and brought a very concrete danger to the situation. The possibility of hunters in the area turned the folkloric tension into real concern. The pet that accompanied him also showed restlessness, reacting to sounds that the human ear could barely identify. Between the heavy atmosphere of the legend and the palpable risks of being in an isolated area under adverse conditions, the YouTuber needed to make a decision. The experience ended with a hurried retreat. Without hesitation, he dismantled the camp and left the place, prioritizing his own safety and that of his four-legged companion. In the middle of the night, a trail camera installed in a wooded area recorded something that left a lot of people intrigued. The image was captured at 4:34 in the morning, with the temperature reading 21 degrees. In the corner of the photo, between the trees, a dark figure appears. Tall, hairy, standing on two legs. The detail that drew attention wasn't just the size, but the posture. The creature seems to be slightly leaning, as if it were watching something on the ground. The camera used was a Tacticam reveal common among hunters and wildlife researchers. Normally it records deer, raccoons, sometimes bears, but this specific silhouette raised doubts. The shape of the body resembles a black bear. They can stand on their hind legs for a few seconds, especially when they're sniffing, but the frozen image, in black and white, creates a strange effect. The head isn't fully visible, the arms look too long, and the dark setting helps fuel theories. Some suggested it could be someone wearing a costume, others bet it's just a bear in an unusual position at the exact moment the camera fired. There is no record of movement before or after this specific photo that fully clarifies it. In the end, the most likely explanation is that of a bear wandering through the woods. Even so, when you look at this image alone, late at night, it's hard not to feel that chill. The content creator Jared Bear decided to go further. He returned to the so-called Murder Road, an isolated road surrounded by forest and marked by crimes that were never solved. There, over the years, several human remains were found. No one responsible was identified. The plan was to do a discreet camp. No campfire, no flashy light, just him, the tent, and the darkness. Before setting up camp, Jared walked through spots where victims were said to have been found, including the area near an old oil well. The atmosphere already felt heavy just from the place's history. During the exploration, he used a device known as a spirit box, trying to make some kind of contact with possible spirits linked to the cases. Some disconnected words came through on the device, which made the tension even greater. But what really scared him didn't come from the device.
They never found me.
They never found me. I don't want to move. Man, I gotta get out of here.
With night fully fallen, the noises in the woods began. Cracks, footsteps, something like voices in the distance. Jared commented several times about the feeling of being watched, until lights appeared near the tent. It wasn't a reflection, they looked like flashlights moving around. Shortly after, he noticed people approaching. The movement became frantic and he decided not to wait to find out who they were. He packed everything up in a rush and left. Mixing stories of unsolved crimes with camping in the dark is already risky. When unknown people show up in the middle of the night, the fear stops being just psychological. Thomas Locke headed out for another night of wild camping, this time accompanied by his dog, Archie. The idea was simple: find an isolated spot in the woods, set up the tent, and record the experience for the channel. But the plan started to go wrong as soon as he entered the chosen area. Right in the first few minutes, Thomas commented on a strange feeling, an unusual silence, no insects, no birds, no typical forest sounds, just that soundless void that makes anyone uncomfortable. Archie noticed it first. The dog started acting differently. He would stop out of nowhere. He kept staring at dark spots between the trees, as if he were seeing something his owner couldn't see. Instead of exploring, he stayed tense, reluctant to move forward. Thomas tried to continue, but the combination of the heavy silence and the animal's behavior weighed on his decision. Before even setting up camp, he decided to retreat. As he moved away, he reported hearing sounds coming from within the woods. Nothing very clear, but enough to reinforce that leaving there had been the right choice. In the end, he preferred to go back home without a complete video rather than ignore his own instinct. Sometimes, the most important warning doesn't come from the camera, but from the feeling that something simply isn't right. He decided to go alone to an isolated area that, according to locals, was linked to obscure rituals and reports of animal sacrifices. The explorer himself started calling the place a cult forest because of the symbols and stories circulating in the region. Even with its heavy history, he set up camp there. During the night, he decided to use two common pieces of equipment in paranormal investigations: the Spirit Talker app and a Ouija board. The idea was to try some kind of contact with possible entities associated with the place. It didn't take long for the atmosphere to get strange. Sounds emerged in the middle of the woods, dry cracks, footsteps that seemed to circle the tent. At certain moments, the electronic devices began to fail. The battery, which was charged, dropped suddenly. He also commented several times about the clear feeling of being watched. The tension rose when, outside the tent, he said he saw something that looked like a human silhouette standing between the trees. The image didn't come through clearly in the recording, but his reaction was immediate.
I don't know what the hell that was. I don't know if I want to know what the hell that was.
He ended the video in a hurry and left the place before dawn. Exploring places with this kind of history already involves natural risks. Doing it alone, in the dark, mixing curiosity with possible people moving around the area, can turn any investigation into a real problem. A man was inside the house when he noticed something strange in the woods behind the backyard. Between the curtains, in the middle of total darkness, two red points shone fixed in the forest. The image was recorded at night. There were no streetlights nearby, no house close by, only trees and an almost complete pitch black. And there in the distance, aligned and motionless, two small points of red light. The guy said he watched for a few seconds, trying to understand what it was. The first hypothesis seemed simple. They could be headlights from a distant car, seen at a specific angle between the trees. But the height of the points didn't seem to match that of a regular vehicle. Another possibility is technology. Security cameras and night vision equipment use infrared light. Sometimes, depending on the sensor and the distance, that infrared can appear as a reddish glow in the recording. If someone had a similar camera in the woods, that would explain the two aligned points. Of course, online it didn't take long for more creative theories to appear. People talking about a creature, about something watching back. Two eyes standing still in the dark always mess with the imagination. In the end, the most likely explanation still involves something common: an animal reflecting light, electronic equipment, or some distant vehicle. But when you look into a completely dark forest and realize there's something glowing red looking at you, it's hard not to get scared. Have you ever seen those horror movies where it's the character himself who films the horror? Well, this case really brings that to mind. It all started with the disappearance of Victor, a 28-year-old photographer who entered a nature reserve alone and never came back. Days later, volunteers began to help with the search. Among them was the content creator Pasha Brill. While exploring through the dense forest, Pasha found something that changed the course of the story: an abandoned campsite. There were clear signs that someone had stayed there for a while. Nearby, he located a camera. The equipment still contained recordings made by Victor before he vanished. The footage, according to Pasha, was unsettling. It showed the photographer walking through dense areas, commenting on strange sounds, but what really drew attention was a segment of the recording where a man appears in the background, and then, at another moment, he notices noises outside, and when he left the tent, he found a knife in the tree. From that, several hypotheses emerged. A possible wild animal attack, a fall at some steep point, or even the chance that he got lost while trying to flee from something. What drew even more attention was the fact that that campsite and the camera had not been found earlier by the official teams. Pasha questioned how relatively visible items went unnoticed in the initial searches. All the material was handed over to the police for analysis. Even so, Victor's final whereabouts remained a mystery. With nightfall and the risks of the forest, Pasha decided to call off the search. Sometimes the woods hold answers, in other cases, they only raise more questions. An incident began after several calls reporting screams coming from a wooded area in Bremerton, Washington. Passers-by said they heard a woman asking for help. Police went to the location to check. Upon arriving at the makeshift camp, officers found a visibly agitated couple. The woman had apparent marks on her face, which raised immediate concern. Even so, both claimed that nothing had happened. They said there had been no fight or assault. The officers, however, were suspicious of the situation. Given the circumstances and her condition, they understood that some kind of conflict could have occurred between the couple. While they tried to clarify the facts, the man, identified as Doug, began acting increasingly hostile.
I don't have I don't have conversation with trash.
Do you want this?
Okay, that's fine.
He began insulting the officers, questioning the approach, and refusing to cooperate. Tension rose when he made direct threats against the team. Faced with the aggressive behavior and resistance to orders, the officers decided to make an arrest for assault on an officer and obstruction. Doug was taken into custody while the woman remained at the scene. Even with the signs, she continued denying any problem. The case ended with the suspect being prosecuted, but the situation itself left doubts in the air. This image started circulating on the internet about 7 years ago, long before the explosion of artificial intelligence tools that can create hyper-realistic scenes. At the time, the discussion was different. Either it was completely real, or someone had used Photoshop. The photo was captured by a camera installed in the middle of the forest. In the foreground, a deer appears in a strange position, almost slipping or making a sideways leap. Its eyes reflect the camera's light, leaving that typical white glow of a nighttime capture. Right above it, in the middle of the darkness, the figure of a bat appears with its wings open, apparently at the exact moment of flight. The combination of the two in the same frame left many people intrigued. Video. One theory says that the deer was fleeing from the bat, but let's be honest, it's not common for an animal of that size to be frightened by a small bat. Another, more plausible hypothesis is that both reacted to the same stimulus. Perhaps a larger predator in the darkness, out of the lens's reach. It could be a setup. It could just be the perfect timing of two startled animals, but the fact is that the image continues to intrigue people to this day. On the morning of July 22nd at 9:17 a.m., Brooke Ashford entered the Cascade Mountain State Forest to go on a hike she already knew well. Experienced, used to posting landscapes on social media, she seemed calm. At 9:18 a.m., the camera at the entrance recorded her smile as she headed alone down the trail. Before that, at 8:47 a.m., she messaged her boyfriend saying she would be back around 1:30 p.m. At 9:42 a.m., her phone emitted its last signal about 3 kilometers into the woods. After that, nothing else. At 3 p.m. with no news, her boyfriend began calling. At 3:30 p.m. he contacted the park rangers. Her car remained in the parking lot. At 6:15 p.m. search teams were already combing trails in restricted areas. Dogs followed the scent to a service road and lost the trail there. The footage showed that at 9:47 a.m. a man left the trail and exited the area. At 9:52 a.m. he presented himself as a volunteer and offered a shortcut. Days later, it was discovered that he had no connection whatsoever to the park. At his home, police found records of monitoring women who posted routes online. 6 bodies were located in isolated points of the forest. Brooke was not among them. On July 30th, after new coordinates were analyzed, she was found alive in a remote cabin after 8 days missing. The person responsible received multiple life sentences. Brooke survived and went on to advocate for more safety on trails and greater caution when sharing location information on the internet. Amid the damp hills of the British countryside, a content creator decided to spend a night completely alone in the forest. The goal was to investigate persistent reports of big cats roaming the region, after local farmers recorded mysterious losses of cattle. For many, it was nothing more than a legend. For him, it was perfect fuel for an expedition. Used to being out in nature, he explained every detail of the preparation, strategic choice of terrain, setting up a shelter with a discreet tarp, a controlled campfire, water filtration, and positioning trail cameras at natural passage points. Beyond the search for answers, there was also a personal motivation. Being in the woods, according to him, was a way to keep his mind balanced, away from the constant pressure of the digital world. During the day, everything seemed under control. Old tracks, common sounds of the local fauna, and the constant wind among the trees made up the typical scene of the British countryside. But when night fell, the mood changed. Shortly after midnight, noises began to emerge beyond the reach of the campfire. Rhythmic cracking sounds, like calculated footsteps. At a certain moment, something seemed to circle the camp, keeping its distance. The explorer, experienced and usually skeptical, admitted that logic was beginning to fail in the face of the feeling of being watched. The trail cameras recorded quick movements at the edges of the clearing, difficult to identify with precision. There was no clear confirmation of a big cat, but it was also not possible to completely rule out the hypothesis. Between one sound and the next was almost more disturbing than the noises themselves. At dawn, the creator reflected on the experience. The forest, even in a densely populated country like the United Kingdom, still holds mysteries. For years, Mark Wilkins built on YouTube an image associated with calm. On the channel Northeast Georgia Kayak Fishing, he appeared gliding by kayak across silent lakes, fishing unhurriedly and talking about how nature helps slow the mind down. For many subscribers, the videos were almost meditative. On the cold morning of December 13th, 2024, the setting seemed perfect for another episode. Lake Emery was covered by a light mist, the water smooth as a mirror. Mark invited his friend John to join him. Gear organized, cameras strapped to their chests, and lines cast into the water. Everything followed the usual script. Hours later, something clashed with the tranquil landscape. Ahead, there was a strange mass floating. At first, it looked like just debris carried by the current. Mark moved the kayak closer slowly, trying to identify the object. Then came the sentence that completely changed the tone of the recording. He believed he was seeing a body.
Oh my God, a dead body.
Panic took over. Mark called 911 while describing the location. He said he could see a hand out of the water and features of a face in an advanced state of decomposition. For an instant, he thought it might be some Halloween prop, but it only took a closer look to realize it was real. John confirmed the suspicion. Near the access ramp, they also noticed a small pair of abandoned Crocs, a detail that heightened the sense of unease. Police cordoned off the area shortly afterward. Later, it was confirmed that it was a 50-year-old woman. By all indications, there was drowning, although many points were not publicly disclosed. Shaken, Mark posted the video days later, carefully edited, seeking to report what happened without disrespecting the victim or her family. During a hike through a mountainous area surrounded by tall trees and dense vegetation, an adventurer decided to capture the landscape. The scene was typical of late afternoon, with the sun filtering through the canopy and creating beams of light between the pale trunks of the trees. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary as he followed the trail. Only later, when reviewing the photo more closely, did he notice something strange. Among the trees in the background, in the densest part of the woods, a bluish point of light appears that was not noticed at the moment of the click. The glow seems to be inside the forest, partially obscured by the trunks, as if something were emitting light in the middle of the vegetation. The image ended up circulating precisely because of that detail. Some people suggested it could simply be an optical effect caused by the position of the sun, an internal lens reflection, or some kind of light distortion common when photographing against the brightness. And of course, there were those who thought it could be something far beyond the natural, or of this world. Whether it was a natural camera phenomenon or something supernatural, the fact is that the adventurer only noticed the detail afterward, and that in itself was enough to turn an ordinary walk into a small mystery captured in an image. Sozinho na Floresta, Cobra Fantasma. Don't forget to subscribe to watch more videos like this.